everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dave Murray. I am Senior Consultant for the DiJulius Group, where we help companies improve their customer service and their customer experience. And today I am excited because I am joined by Verne Harnish to talk about his appearance at our Secret Service Summit this September. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Verne, but for those of you who are not, here's a quick introduction to all the things that he has done, and it's a lot. He's founder of Entrepreneurial Organization. He's founder of Gazelles. He is the venture columnist for Fortune magazine, and he's written such great books, such as, here's my favorite right here, my autographed copy of Scaling Up, which is your most recent, Verne, and then also, of course, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits and The Greatest Business Decisions Ever Made. So Verne, first of all, thank you for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you here.
Dave, glad to join you.
Thank you. So it's an honor to have you, and it's an honor to have you back at the Secret Service Summit. And I wanted to start with this because the timing was great. I was just on a conversation last week with the CEO of a company on the West Coast. And we were talking about his business. We were talking about how they're growing, all the things they have going on. And he said to me, we are following Scaling Up word for word. And they're growing tremendously. They're growing so fast and so well. So I know you probably hear that a lot because you've helped so many companies, but that must be pretty cool to hear day in and day out.
You know, Dave, it is. We're very missional. For 34 years, all we've been doing is one thing, trying to help companies scale up. And as you know, that's what's important. 11,000 companies start up an hour in the world. And so we got pretty healthy startup communities. The challenge is how do we get those companies to scale up? And that's really where the innovation and the jobs and all the interesting stuff happens. And so we're super excited when we hear that because we know that's critical to our economies.
That's great. Now, I imagine with all that you have helped, and I'm going to get into that a little further because it's over 40,000 you have helped. I would imagine from time to time you hear back. Some of them you probably even know. You work with them personally. Some you've never met ever. I would think that there's a couple of stories that you hear either firsthand or get emailed to you. And I'm just curious, do you have a couple of favorite stories of right now that have happened recently of companies that you helped or maybe even saved?
Yeah, you know what? One of them is Gene Brown. He's got this garbage company up in Galway, Ireland. And right in the middle of the recession, he's got 60 employees. He's just trying to really honestly make payroll back in 2010. And then he attended our two-day workshop, Set a BHAG, to have 1 million customers by 2020. And the great news is he put our tools in place. And I just 2 weeks ago got an update from Gene. And they are close. They're on their way to that 1 million mark, having ended up with a partnership with a $350 million company called Averta in the Middle East, where they're now running the corporate waste management operations for this huge company. And that's moved them out of Galway, through Europe, the Middle East, and other parts of the world. And so he's on it. And he said one of the key things that's working is they just did a theme around price. And they were able to increase the average revenue per customer by 7% in just 90 days. And man, in an industry that's got that tight of margins, to have a 7% increase, typically it goes right to the bottom line. And that's the kind of stuff that we hear about all the time.
That's great. It must be so rewarding to hear of all these companies. I was thinking this the other day, you're almost like your own little economic engine, if you will, with all the companies that you have helped.
Yeah, we are. And by the way, we have an initiative right now, Dave, where we're going to be working over the next 10 years with 150 cities. And instead of trying to help 10,000 startups, we're identifying 150 scale-ups within that city. So just had a meeting today in Barcelona, and there's a company, Barcelona Housing Systems, that we're involved in. It's probably run by a 58-year-old entrepreneur. It's probably going to be the next unicorn here locally. We were also excited, Scott at Atlassian was kind enough to endorse the back of the book, and they just went public December 10th for $4.2 billion, and the stock is up. And what we love about the story is Scott and his partner were also able to hold on to 70% of the company in that scale up. And so they are the two newest billionaires down in Australia. And so we've had a great run here just in the last few months.
Wow, what a great story. So let me ask you this, Verne. We're so excited to have you coming back to our Secret Service Summit. That will be here in Cleveland, Ohio on September 29th and 30th this year. And we can't wait to have you. Can you tell me a little bit about what an audience member at our summit this year can expect to hear from you?
Yeah. Well, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to talk about what is the 3 biggest barriers to scaling up an organization, both whether you're a division inside, as you and I talked about, we're doing some work inside Intel, the guy that's heading up innovation at Coca-Cola, their founders group, every time they invest in a company, he gives a bunch of my books to that particular company. So we're working inside large companies and inside these typical mid-market scale-ups. And we're going to be looking at what are these 3 fundamental barriers that get in the way and what you've got to do about it. Number 2, we're going to talk about this issue of price. A lot of folks are so focused on the cost side of their business that they're really missing the huge opportunity here in 2016 and beyond on the pricing side of the business. And then we're going to take a look at this real tough challenge, which is, look, I've got 1,000 things to do in any one day. I know I need to pick a few, but how do I pick which ones I need to work on first? So everybody says, set your priorities and follow them, but nobody really tells you how to pick the right priority. And by the way, that is one of the most important decisions that every leader has to make.
Wow, I can't wait to hear that. I can just imagine. Sure, that's probably what sets a lot of people apart, but also the downfall to most, I would think.
Well, I think we just saw it with Marissa Mayer at Yahoo. Marissa is sharp, and I know she's gotten 999 things done, but I'm going to share the 2 things that she hasn't done, and you see the result. You've got a company that's literally up for a fire sale.
Right. So let me ask you this also, Verne, since you've been to our summit in the past, and you know that we have companies that range in size from as large as some of those large companies you spoke about that you work with, like Coca-Cola and Intel, huge companies, but also smaller mom and pop. So you could tell me what you think are a few takeaways anyone could take and turn into an actionable item after they hear you speak.
Well, look, everyone, I don't care whether you're a startup or you're that large company, you've got to set priorities. And picking that right thing's critical. Everyone's got to focus on cash. We're going to be looking at the 4 fundamental things you need to focus on. People. We all have challenges on the people side of the business. Strategy. If you don't get the strategy right, you're going to waste the next 3 to 5 years of execution. Again, whether you're a startup or you're, Yahoo moving forward. Execution, I think, is always a challenge. Companies have a tendency to just throw bodies at the problem, particularly the small to mid-sized companies. Actually, ironically, more than the large companies do. And then cash, probably not as big a concern for the large companies, but it is the oxygen that the small to mid-sized companies absolutely need to pay attention to. But look, there's a reason why Warren Buffett sits on $80 billion, why Jim Collins suggested that the companies that do well, big and small, have a considerably larger pile of cash so they can weather the storm when things bad happen and can take advantage of the good when it does. So how do you actually get more cash? I think it's important for everyone.
Absolutely. You brought up a good point there, how you find, and ironically, that typically it's the smaller companies who are throwing more bodies at issues as opposed to maybe strategizing a little better. Why do you think that is? Is that primarily fear and they just go into hyper growth mode?
No, you know what? I think it's just not knowing any better. You've just doubled the size of the company and your head of payroll comes in and said, look, I'm working 80-hour weeks. I need some help around here. And so you just tell them to go hire someone. Unlike a story I'm going to share of a mid-market company who did the opposite, was actually able to double with the same headcount that they've got, and the head of payroll ended up working less than half the time. And so we really believe that there's probably a 4x opportunity most of these companies have. And by the way, one of the simple things is look at revenue per employee. We just had a company call us up in a panic out of Minneapolis saying, hey, we've been doing business for 3M for many, many years, and we just lost a significant contract with them because they thought our pricing was too high. And obviously they were the premium price, unbelievable service and quality. And so I had him do something very simple. I said, tell me what your revenue per employee is. And he did. And then we looked at 3M's, and 3M is twice the revenue per employee as this mid-market company. We often view these large Fortune 500 as these bureaucratic, bloated organizations. But, Dave, it's interesting. They normally have 3 times industry revenue per employee and even profit per employee. And that's a huge wake-up call for mid-market companies.
Absolutely. I would have never guessed that if you asked me to compare those 2 examples. I would have thought for sure the large, long, and probably have too much payroll.
You got it. Yeah. So we're gonna tackle some of those issues.
Well, that's great. We can't wait. So again, our Secret Service Summit is here in Cleveland, Ohio. It's September 29th and 30th this year. And Verne, I hope you have a wonderful summer. We can't wait to see you this fall in Cleveland. And thank you again so much for joining us.
You got it, Dave. See you then.